Hello, much blessings, much love. And for a while I wanted to make this video about alchemical process, which I study and practice very deeply. Alchemy is a theme, I can say, of my life since I remember myself. The deep spiritual transformation was just embedded in my life with various catalyzers and spiritual search, and then practices, and then services that I provide. And yes, and quite recently I made a web course for 7-step alchemical process. That is classically known process with the 7 steps through which that deep spiritual alchemical transformation is achieved. And since I started to study those steps more in depth, and since I gathered lots of knowledge, experiences, and practices, I found that all of those pieces started to come together and fill each of those steps. So, in a sense, I created a systematic way of ascension. It is like building the bridge between this physical personality, this physical reality, and more higher, more expanded spiritual reality. And basically, that's what an alchemist do. Alchemist can be described as someone who is mastering the art of transformation. And by doing that, there is 2 main principles: separate and combine. So we separate various elements out of which we have constructed our personalities, our sense of self, by growing in this planetary humanistic experience. And we taken various things from society, from conditioning, and as we can see, those things many times are toxic, out of alignment with nature, with our spiritual nature, and thus creates various forms of suffering. And the suffering is that catalyzer, that force which initiates actually this alchemical process. And I will talk briefly about each of those steps. But before that, just want to lay some more foundations. So we separate various vibrations, ideas, experiences, elements, and then we purify them, refining them. And then we put them back together in a more balanced and harmoniously unified way. And when that balanced unity is achieved, it is like a source portal opens up, and it can open up more widely since we are keep practicing the alchemy, because it is a cyclical process. It is not just that we work with each step for about a week and we are done. No, it is just one cycle, and yes, we are keep doing that and keep refining that, keep evolving, keep ascending, if we choose to do so. And yes, and now it is a time in our collective when we need to choose our path. And yes, there are paths that are out of balance. For example, too much yang, too much fiery energy leads to more conflicts, to more war, and too much yin, watery energy leads to various codependencies with technology, pleasures, which then sucks our life force because we don't have our strong spine. So and there is that path, that middle path, when we choose to balance our energies within ourselves, within our chakras, and then we open up a portal for ourselves to cross into more spiritualized versions of Earth, which is really like a paradise, and lots of new exciting possibilities opens up to explore. Yes, so that's the principle. That's the basic principle of alchemy. So we are reconstructing ourselves again and again, and by doing that we making closer and closer relationship again between heaven and earth, fire and water, spirituality and humanity. Yes, and that's very, very sweet experience when we start to experience this human physical reality more from the perspective of source, of the pure blissfulness of the God. That's what happens when we practicing alchemy. And of course there are many ways to practice that, to achieve that. Basically it ties into just follow your heart, and of course in balance with your mind and everything else. And yes, there are more systems with more steps I saw about alchemy specifically, but yes, I focus on those 7 steps, and those 7 steps are perfectly matched with 7 chakras. So yes, I got this realization from one of my mentor, I could say, Ryoka, channeled by Tyler Ellison. I get a lot of confirmations and adjustments in that by having this relationship with that entity. So that realization was very obvious. It was even strange to me how can I didn't realize that myself. But yes, all of those seven steps are perfectly matched with 7 chakras. And then I started to really going deep into that realization, and as I said, various practices that I gathered throughout my intense spiritual life started to come into places. And then I felt inspired to create a course, and by doing that course, which was a 7-week course, 1 week per step, I even refined that more deeply, and more clarity arrived while going through each week. And I feel myself very good results, and I see that my life becomes even more magical. And and I see good reflections also from the group which I guide, and I think I will keep doing that. And my one of the intention again with doing this video is to invite you, because I am planning to do this in English. My native language is Lithuanian and I love it. It is very spiritually activating. But yes, it is already shared material is there. So now I begin to be more inspired to do that in English. So I will leave my email for that if you are interested after watching this video to join. Just write me, and when the group gathers, we will plan to do it. It might be on the Facebook group, because it is a good platform to store the information, the videos, the meetings that we can also gonna do in Zoom. So yeah, and about price, again, since it's my first course in English, I will be very flexible with that. Yeah, because I just feel inspired to do that. And yeah, it also deepens me, and I learn a lot by doing that. So here, since these foundations are laid out, I can now briefly describe this process. So, as I said before, the main initiator, usually in these times, is suffering. And that represents the fire, the inner fire. And the inner fire is usually associated with the first chakra, which is root chakra. Red fire, red chakra and red fire. Usually, yes, its element is earth, but on alchemy, all elements a little bit switches places, because yes, it initiates the transformation, the inner transformation, like a caterpillar goes into cocoon and everything changes within that cocoon, and then it comes out as a butterfly. So yeah, the similar process with us, and those processes very natural, they happen very natural. Sometimes even some parts of those processes people describe as mental illnesses like depression or panic attacks, but I see those occurring like natural steps in the process of inner transformation. Because yeah, we are not here to stagnate and live boring lives. We are here to always change with life, transform with life, evolve. So here, in this first step, comes this inner fire which inspires us to grow, which inspires us to know ourselves more deeply. And this process is called calcination. It is when, yes, everything is burning on the high temperature, and usually it is associated with burning various very rigid structures of our ego, those structures that goes out of alignment with our true nature. So we are burning away various toxic relationships with various things are burning away. And yes, in the Western understanding of alchemy, there are no practices, no described practices. At least I didn't find any practices for that. But I gathered lots of practices from Eastern traditions. And yes, I saw that we are perfectly fitting. And I believe that in ancient days, yes, all of those understandings and practices were more connected, more unified, and just later on we gone into deeper forgetfulness, darkness, and yes, with our shadow egos, we just separated everything and become arrogant and so on. But now it's time to put everything together again, and maybe in the more full and powerful way. So that's what I am inspired to do. And in this first step, since it is associated with fire, so there are practices that specifically works to awaken that inner fire, like Tibetan practice called Tumo, which is translated as inner fire. So there are exercises which combines breathing, visualization, inner sounds or inner mantras, and also inner smile practices. And yes, when all of those faculties, those inner faculties of ours are focused in a specific practice, in specific meditations, they yield very powerful effects that we can really feel in our physical and energetical systems. So yeah, it basically about raising that inner fire, burning away all rigid impurities, and just giving ourselves space to just be, to just feel that suffering and allow that suffering to serve us, to direct the suffering into higher realizations. Because behind that suffering there is just that raw life force, like a fuel that we can use in a very positive way. So again, I will not go very broadly on those steps, just briefly, so you can understand and maybe apply in your own way, fill with your own experience and details. So second step is watery step, and it is called dissolution. So it is connected to second chakra, our sacral chakra on the belly. And yeah, usually the chakra is also associated with water, and in alchemy is also water. So you can see that it is it is fire below, and water, like a cauldron of water where various alchemical operations happening, is on the belly. And this dissolution step works with water, so we know that water is more softer element, so it is about really tuning into deep feelings, into our subconsciousness, and just healing. Yeah, I feel that this step is very much about healing. Yeah, in alchemy it's described as dissolving of the ashes. So yeah, again, it is not, alchemy is not so much as separating and ridding some parts of ourselves somewhere away, because again, everything is one, everything circulates, so we just transform those parts of ourselves. Because yes, everything is made out of pure particles of divine light, and just how they put together is what determines how it appears and what experiences it produces. That's forms of experiences, but we can always break it down to the basic compounds and make different structures. So yeah, in the solution we are dissolving that raw structures, and we are healing, we are feeling into the various painful experiences maybe that we gathered throughout our lives. We usually gather many traumatic experiences. So this step deals with putting those experiences out in our loving care, where we can revisit them and yeah, like massage them, sending more compassion, more loving kindness into that. And then yeah, it lightens up. It lightens up like yes, like boiling the water. The water starts to produce a steam, which is that purified energy. So in this step, there are practices that is connected with circulating the energies, again using breath, using visualization, and tuning into feelings. And then the third step is called separation. And it can happen, yeah, it can be associated with the third chakra, solar plexus chakra, which usually is correspondent to fire, but now in alchemy it is air. So fire is below. And yes, here is air. But again, as we know, air can be very sharp, and air is connected to intellect. The sharpness of mind plays in this step to separate in our awareness those various mixed frequencies that we gather throughout our lives. So we can unmix them, purify them, and yes, and then putting them together, which happens on the fourth step. So yeah, in this step, it is very relevant to do self-inquiry, but more on our personal self, more on our personality, just getting to know our strengths, our weaknesses, and how we can make our weaknesses into strengths, and so on, and finding various beliefs behind our emotional state and behind our behaviors, so we can again create our reality in a more conscious way, in accordance with our true joy. So yes, of course, there are also energetical practices. It can be yogic practices and so on, which activates this center. It is also relevant, but yeah, it is more connected to sharpening the mind. So various meditations, when we concentrate on certain objects, is very, very good, because yeah, in this step we are learning to concentrate and to separate various parts of ourselves, isolate them and examine them. So yeah, that brings a lot of wisdom and yes, when everything becomes obvious, and yeah, and when we naturally change as the personalities. And on the fourth step, which is connected to heart chakra, it is called conjunction. And it is connected to earth element. So usually heart chakra is connected with air, but now we bring earth here. So here is earth on the heart area. There is air below the earth, then is water, and then there is fire below water. So we can see like how elements switch, because usually, yeah, fire is higher than water and air is higher than earth. But we like putting those higher elements below and raising those lower elements above. And then that alchemical process can happen. Yes, and basically alchemy is like that. It is about, yes, bringing higher energies and integrating them into lower centers, and then lower centers bringing up to the higher centers. And yes, and by doing that, more and more unity between all of those levels is achieved, and then we can really feel as that holistic divine beings, not something compartmentalized and against the bigger nature. So yeah, the fourth step is conjunction, connecting those purified parts. So again, water, fire, water, air, like a steam, and then that purified steam like combines like in nature. It forms the clouds, and then clouds again rain back to the earth. So that's also one of natural examples of alchemical process. But in this case, yes, we are like creating new earth in our hearts. And that's how we actually create it outside. It comes from within. It is just reflection of our inner state. So here we are creating new personality structure, like an alchemical child. And in this step, it is good to focus on uniting various energies. So again, the heart chakra is that center between 3 lower and 3 higher chakras. So it is also connecting those higher and lower energies in the heart. When we have those yin-yang polarities, like in yogic system, we have central channel, central channel, and then we have those peripheral channels, those parallel energies like yin and yang, female and male energies. So we also uniting those energies within ourselves. That passive and active energy, finding that sweet balance between those energies of giving, receiving, and so on. When we connect our future and past also into the present, we're connecting to the frequencies of our past selves and future selves from our linear perspective. And when that unification occurs, we again purify our relationship with our stream of time, with our story. And once those energies is acknowledged and purified, then we can feel more joy and more energy in our living present. So again, there are lots of practices. There are various Qigong practices that can be applied here. And yes, I'm using basically practices from Tibet, yogic practices, Taoist practices, and various meditation practices in these steps. And of course, relevant theory, relevant knowledge and wisdom also. Because each of these steps carries lots of wisdom. So here we combining those parts together. We form this new personality, but as I said, it is like a child. But a child, it needs to grow. Even though it's purified, yet it still needs to grow and to gather more power, more wisdom from the higher centers. So the 5th step is called fermentation, and it can be focused on the throat chakra. And throat chakra is also all about purifying, all about purification, bringing higher harmony to everything. Setting your unique, authentic tone. Yes, it is deeply connected to authenticity. And fermentation is also the process of deep purification, higher purification. So we could say that first 4 steps is like one part of the journey, and the next 3 steps is like very similar process that happened before, but in a higher density. So in the higher frequencies, yes. So since on the first step there was fire, and on the second water, so on this step there are higher fire and water works together to purify our souls, from various negative karmic imprints, from various shadow aspects of ourselves. But because since we are evolving ourselves and bringing more light, more divine light to ourselves, on the more subtle levels there are also will be shadow dimensions to these levels, and that's where the term spiritual ego comes into play. So by accumulating more knowledge, more power, more wisdom, we can become arrogant. We can become, sometimes I forgot the words, ignorant, So, in this step, we are going into very, very deep letting go with various forms of experience, like, I don't know how to say in English, it's like dissociate. It is like disidentify, the more correct term is disidentify with various forms, even spiritual forms of experiences, because if we stuck to them, then we again cannot have a holistically harmonious relationship with the world and with ourselves. So we need to stay open, we need to stay that integral. So on those steps, it is like ego death process happens. It can also be translated as the dark night of the soul, but usually that happens when we resisting to this natural transformation and letting go. Because whatever we can let go, whatever falls, is not essentially us. We can associate ourselves with those illusions, but yes, we need to know ourselves beyond all of those changing forms of experiences. So, it's like emptying out. It's like surrendering consciously. So various practice connected to surrendering and to also activating the throat, that purifying blue light is perfect for this step. And after that purification happens, then spiritualization begins. So the next part of this step is also inviting our higher selves, our higher spirit, that pure spirit, to enter into our bodies, into our lives in a more full way, in a more conscious way, because we are consciously inviting that higher self, and it, of course, can integrate more deeply. So when we achieve that state of surrendering, of that openness, then we can go in that meditation which is effortless, when we feel like we are not doing anything but just higher spirit raises us in bliss. So that's that spiritualization process, and with that many spiritual insights and even abilities can come. Your path of destiny, your vision may come more clearly. Okay, so that's enough on this, and the sixth step is called distillation, And yeah, it can be connected to the third eye, and it can be connected to higher air element. So it will be again connected to separation and the intellect, but it is now on the deeper level. So on the third step, of which is called separation, we were examining our personal self. So on this step, we are examining our spiritual self, our essence. We are getting the essence of our soul. So there applies very deep self-inquiries, which is more connected to the question who I am, and various Zen koans like who I was before I born into this body, who I will be after I leave this body, who I am while I dreaming. Yes, so yeah, it is also very good practice for that is ancient yogic Indian, I don't know from where exactly it came from, but it is called neti neti. Not this, not that, not this, not that. So when we sit in our meditations, various associations, again, on who we are may come, may be presented from the gross to very subtle and abstract states of being. And we need to sift through all of those states. And yes, going into the essence, which cannot be defined or grasped by our five senses and even mind. We are going into the very essence of our mind, which is pure awareness that encompasses everything and has no outside. That pure beingness, that pure spark of God that we are at the core of our individuality, that Atmanic self. So yeah, this distillation process is about that, on getting the essence, getting the taste of your true self. And when that occurs, again, those pure particles of self evaporates, rises through our crown chakra, and like a cosmic dust starts to form our light body, our so-called light energy body, which is made out of that alchemical gold, out of that purified substance, which is resilient and surviving deaths, various forms of deaths, and contains, yes, powers from above and below, and so on. And now just sun came to show itself behind this tree. So it is really like forming that sun above you, like on the fourth step, which is connected to earth, and it's like forming the earth. So here above, it is like a higher version, which would be the sun, because earth is also like the sun on its nucleus, and sun is more expanded version of that nucleus. Yes, and yes, it is called coagulation. So it is again connected to unifying everything, integrating that essence And yes, it is not stays above us, but in this step and in various practice that I connected to this step, it is about bringing that sun into our bodies, into our auras, integrating that into each lower chakra. Yes, the light body is not something that we create, and then it will wait somewhere outside after we die, and then we can enter into that light body and travel with that light body wherever we want, which what happens when we crystallize this light body. We become completely free, completely sovereign. I don't know if I pronounce it correctly. Sovereignty, that is the term. That full realization of our free will. But since we are practicing that while we're still alive in these human bodies, we can integrate that free will. We can integrate that light body in our physical lives. Yes, so this final step I see as more of acting on that sense of self, really expressing that sense of self, empower our lives, inspire our lives and others through our example of consciously choosing to be ourselves to the fullest. And yes, and then that light body can empower really various magical abilities that can be relevant. It can empower our art and whatever we are love to do. And yes, on the fourth step, I also encourage people to follow your heart. Just focus on doing what you really love. That also helps to crystallize this fourth step of conjunction. So yeah, on the coagulation, it is the same, just from the higher level. It is like, yes, like connecting your personal will to the will of the divine, realizing that unity, realizing that alignment with your higher self, and really channeling that energy, that unified stream, like Jesus said, I'm doing my Father's will. So it is exactly that. It is opening all channels to allow that divine energy with its all power and wisdom to channel through into collective, uplifting the collective. And yes, there are also various practices which integrates that higher light into lower chakras. It's like, yes, like filling the cup with pure light, with that alchemical gold, mixing the inner fire with that nectar of bliss, and when those energy mixes, like Shiva and Shakti also blends in love, then yes, that alchemical elixir is produced, and when it gets integrated in our bodies, into our energy bodies, into our auras, and that forms this light body or rainbow body. Like here you also see the rainbow coming from the light. And yes, and then our experience really changes. It becomes more psychedelic, like I did previous video about psychedelic experiences and how in reality we are actually living in the trip. So you can watch that video, it is very insightful. And yes, and through that alchemical process it becomes very obvious, and that's actually more harmonious and more integral, responsible and gradual way to build up to those higher frequencies to which various powerful psychedelics can take us momentarily. And yes, and it is the process which is not isolated into container of spiritual practices. Then you can see alchemy in everything, in all situations of your life. You will see how they reflect this inner transformation process. So yes, it is about holistic approach to that, and really becoming masterful in all areas of your life, in various details, in various small micro movements that you do. Because yes, our lives and all our successes is built from those small little actions and details and events that occur. So we want to be more conscious and more loving, more masterful in everything. Seeing all life as continuation of alchemy or meditation. Yes, I was also made a video here where I talked about how I experience life as the satsang, as the devotion for the highest truth. Yes, so I feel now complete with this video. It is almost an hour. Yes. And then, yes, cycle continues, as I said. So we should never come to some kind of final conclusions, because that's again, that spiritual arrogance that wants to isolate itself, like I done it, I completed it, I know everything, and so on. No, whatever enlightenment you can experience, there are always more macro versions of that. Yes, even those enlightening experiences that we are experiencing through most powerful psychedelics, again like Bufo, Elverius, we are still experiencing them through this physical body, and that again plays a part on how we are experiencing those high densities of light. And yes, and maybe after death in pure spirit, those states are different. So yeah, there are always more. It is good to keep that in heart, just that there is always opened room to for more love, for more bliss, for more kindness, more goodness to come in each moment. And it is, yes, a lifetime process of ascension, which also includes descension. Yes, it is like we descend when we on the springboard, when we jump again, maybe raising higher, then again going down, but maybe not as much as before, because we're building up. As I said, it is like building up a gradual bridge, and that's why I'm so excited about this system, about the systematic way of ascension, because it creates true stability, true integrity. It is not just like jumping to higher meditations, realizations, but not having balance our lower centers, and then those realizations can be easily lost, and we are again pulled into various toxic loops. So yeah, that gradual way of working with yourself and ascending allows to really experience that in the most smooth, beautiful, balanced way. And another thing, yes, it might be longer video. I also wanted to touch upon the caduceus symbol, because I'm very connected to that symbol. It came to me in a very powerful way on my first powerful ayahuasca journey. I saw golden caduceus just overlaying my body. And caduceus, yes, it is like that pole, and which represents our central channel, when two snakes that crossing their paths on each chakra, and they completely merge on the third eye chakra when they grow wings, and then above that it is like that sphere of God, of divine mind. So yeah, it is very, very good symbol to picture this process. And as I heard again from Ryok, it said that serpentine power is alchemical power of our Gaia, our nature, which is also in its nature very balanced. All elements here are very balanced, and that allows us again to stabilize ourselves and to work with ourselves in a very streamlined, balanced way. Yeah, it is like a launch pad into source, this earth. And we can use those powers also in our practices. We can call upon those snakes, and I like to visualize those snakes coming from the golden core of our planet, raising up our legs, and one snake is more young and more brighter golden color, and another is more darker but also golden color, representing yin. Yes, and then you can see how those snakes also connects to each chakra and balances each chakra. So we can also look at our chakras through the lens of balancing yin and yang. So basically, yes, too much yang is overheat, too much activity, restlessness, and too much yin is too much stagnancy. When energy is stagnating or just get lost in variety, so we balance those energies. And yes, on each chakra there is different imbalances and different ways to balance them. Yes, as I talked about the throat chakra, which can be imbalanced from arrogance and ignorance, so that again represents that yin-yang imbalance. And yeah, it can also be swings between those extremes. like bipolar disorder, so-called. But again, all of those disorders helps to find that balance, that sweet balance. Yes, and then, again, when each chakra is balanced, the more pure source energy can come. In bigger dosage we can receive that source energy, and that transforms us, that uplifts us, that expands our consciousness. But again, we don't need to rush into that. We want to do it in an integral and balanced way, because we know that our body consciousness, our intellect is moving at the different speeds, at the different rates than our spirit, which is much higher frequency. So we need to keep in check all of those parts of ourselves and just keeping our pace. And usually it is always good, since it is already accelerated path. The alchemy is very accelerated path of ascension, so we constantly need to balance that frequency with slowing down, slowing down, slowing down. And paradoxically, as I found in my experience, the more I slow down, the more then I accelerate. Because yes, in spiritual evolution, slowing down is usually equal to speeding up. But yeah, but again, it happens in a very balanced way. Because we are allowing to slow down our mind, our body, which is usually goes out of balance. So yeah, it is important to take our time, since we in essence we are always timeless. And then we realize what's the rush? Why to force anything? No, we want to enjoy the very process. That's why we created this journey. And we can guide this journey from the place of compassion and loving kindness. Yeah, and eventually we grow those spiritual wings, as I said, that we are like those spiritual infants that need to grow our wings to learn to fly into various different dimensions, gather various lost parts of ourselves. And yes, and then we can more and more align to the very mind of God. And also it is a path which invites us to always meet difficulties when they arise, to meet ourselves fully, to meet our weaknesses. But I found that again it is more easy than to avoid those things, because avoidance just creates more weight and more stress that eventually we still need to transform. So better to consciously and actively meet these things and transform these things. As Lao Tzu said, I always meet difficulties so my path stays easy. That's the wisdom. And yes, now I feel complete. And again, it is just, again, I don't know how to say in English, just a crumb, just a tiny portion of it. So for those who want to go in depth with that, I invite you to my course, and I will post more information and maybe some links when I create that. But again, if you feel resonance to what I share and in general to my energy, then do not hesitate and just let me know. Just write me an email. So thank you very much for your precious attention, for your curiosity in that, for receiving that you received, and I bless you that this will serve you greatly. So see you later, and much love.